do that as well. So welcome and hello. I'm so happy to see you with me today. We've got Alice joining us from Squamish, BC. Hello. I'm a holistic nutritionist and a chef and really love teaching people about good health. Alice, thanks for introducing yourself and welcome. Good to hear from you. We've got Michelle Conkle. I just finished the course with Midwest School of Herbal Studies. I'm in Sauk City, Wisconsin, going to start a small business in my town. Welcome, Michelle. Good to have you. Tanya Card says, hi, Tanya from Barhead, Alberta, holistic nutrition student. Tanya, welcome. Tanya, what school are you studying with? So good to have you with us. And we've got Diadem joined us on Instagram as well. And we've got Magdi Toth with us on Facebook. So good to have you with us today. We are getting ready. And Tanya says she's with CSNN. Good school. I did not graduate there. I did my nutrition training before CSNN was a thing. I will tell you, I have an amazing respect for the CSNN grads. So good choice of school there. So congratulations on that. And we've got Suki Manku who's saying hello as well. Fabulous. So good to have you all with us today. Essentially, Shelley says, I'm researching for myself. I have a TBI and it affected my eyes and vision. Interesting. Thanks for being with us, Shelley. Appreciate seeing you on Instagram. Let's hop in, shall we? Now that we've got things all set up, just double checking that you can all see my screen. We've got Dolores from Vancouver Island. Hello, Dolores. Good to see you here. Welcome. And if you can see my computer screen, give me a 1. Just type 1 in the comments. And obviously you've got my audio, so that's good. Just want to make sure the tech is actually working. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Love that. Thank you for those of you that are bleh, bleh, bleh. Do you have that some days where your brain works faster than your mouth? Okay, so here we go. We are going to answer 4 questions very specifically today. Thank you, essentially, Shelley. I'm glad you can see the screen too. Glad you're there. And we're going to answer these 4 questions. What is iridology? Why does it work? What can it teach us? And how should it be used? So I would love to know, as we're beginning, how many of you already have iridology training under your belt? I'm going to qualify that. Iridology training that you feel comfortable using professionally. And if that's you, if you've got iridology training that you're comfortable using professionally, give me a 2 in the comments. And while those are coming in, I also want you to feel comfortable asking questions. So if you have any other questions you would like to ask me, please just type them into the chat or in the comments, wherever you are. I'm doing my best to monitor all of those. And again, it's so good to know that we've got so many nutritionists and herbalists with us. This is amazing. So what I'm saying is that none of you have already got iridology training under your belt that you're comfortable using. So you are in the exact right place. You are the exact people I want to be teaching today. So I'm so glad you're with me. I'd like to spend just a moment introducing myself. My name is Judith Cobb. I am a master herbalist, a nutrition coach, and I am affiliated, for those of you who are in Canada, you'll recognize these groups, with the International Organization of Nutritional Consultants. I'm also a member of the Canadian Association of Holistic Nutrition Professionals, and I'm also a member of the Canadian Association of Natural Nutrition Practitioners. I maintain memberships in all 3 of those organizations, because they each offer different things. I'm not saying that you necessarily need to do that, but they each have benefits and I enjoy the benefits, so why not? I'm also a member of the Alberta Herbalist Association. I have been a holistic health coach for 4 decades. This is what I did instead of finishing university to be an elementary school teacher. Yeah, I jumped ship just like a year before I was going to graduate. And I'm actually glad I did. I think this is a much better fit. I am also a member of the International Iridology Practitioners Association, and I am a certified instructor with the International Iridology Practitioners Association. My iridology training spans 8 different teachers. I've been certified by 3 different schools. And of course, that is including being certified by this organization, the International Iridology Practitioners Association. My original training in iridology began 40 years ago, and it was in the North American style of iridology. That didn't work for me. It is very diagnosis heavy, and I never found it to be accurate. And diagnosing is beyond the scope of what my practice is. As a holistic nutritionist, nutrition coach affiliated with all of these different organizations, and even as a master herbalist, the scope of practice does not include diagnosis. It includes assessment, but not diagnosis. And so as I became frustrated with that diagnostic model, I was about ready to walk away from iridology when I was blessed with the opportunity to learn constitutional iridology. And constitutional is a style of iridology that is extremely holistic, and it avoids diagnosing and it avoids prescribing. So it fits beautifully for those of us who are limited in our scope of practice by our professional designations. All right. And so let's answer this question. You ready? To answer the question of what is iridology? Iridology is the study of the colored part of the iris, right? This part right here, the colored part of the iris, of the eye rather. And so that is obviously called the iris. And for those who might be very new to this science, it is pronounced iridology, not iridology, because it is spelled with a capital I. This is a long I, iridology. Constitutional iridology recognizes that certain iris traits always suggest a short list of specific health predispositions. Okay, notice I didn't say that it recognizes that certain iris traits always tell us there is a disease process. That would be diagnosing. And it doesn't give us a diagnosis. It doesn't give us the name of a disease. Instead, it teaches us what we've inherited from about 4 generations, the past 4 generations. We also know from iridology that we can't change it by doing cleanses, by fasting, or taking specific supplements. We may be able to change what we see in the sclera by changing our diet and our lifestyle, but we're not going to change what we see in the iris. And does it make sense that if we see changes in the sclera, it may, to a certain extent, impact how we perceive what we see in the iris? Does that make sense? So when we are looking at iridology, this gives us a framework that helps us understand our clients' physical health and their emotional and personality tendencies as well. Modern iridologists, as I alluded to just a moment ago, also include a study of the sclera, or the white of the eye. And we do include this when we study constitutional iridology, because where the iris is genetic, it's inherent, it's what's been passed down, so we're not going to be changing what we see in the iris. The sclera is dynamic. The sclera shows us where things may be being activated in the body right now, or may have become chronic, and can give us a lot of indications as to where we need to work. So when we look at the sclera and we see certain markings here, if we see markings in the iris that would correspond, and if the client has symptoms that would correspond, then that helps us to understand specifically what we need to work on. Is this all making sense so far? And again, feel free to post questions wherever you are. So how did iridology come to be? Well, it is rooted in ancient cultures. So we know that Egypt, India, China, Greece all gave us bits and pieces and parts of foundations that have helped us to understand iridology the way it is now. Now, it's really important to remember that science evolves, right? We once thought the earth was flat. Now we know differently. I mean, some people still believe the earth is flat and they fail to keep up with the research. It's true, though, that science does evolve. And in just about every field of science, what was once embraced as truth has given way to research and new discoveries. And those truths have had to change. They've had to be modified because of the new information. Good science will always continue to do this. And this is absolutely true with iridology. What we thought we knew 40 years ago, we now know is incorrect. A lot of it. It has evolved. And that is so important. How many of you like the idea that there is still research going on with iridology? If you like the idea that there's still research going on in iridology, give me a 3 in the comments. Hi, Emma. Good to see you on Instagram. Thanks for being there. It's fun to see names of people I know. Yeah. Thank you. Those of you on Facebook, thank you. I love that you love that there is constant research going on. We want to know exactly where we're supposed to be. Thank you so much for that, for weighing in on that. Yeah. So let's go back to the roots of North American iridology. And Carrie O on Facebook is saying, giving me a 3 as well, that she likes that there's research going on. So where we started in North America was with this story with Ignaz von Petschle. And the story has so many variations to it that it's become an urban myth. He was an 11-year-old boy in Hungary, and we don't know whether he caught this owl or let's start at the beginning. We don't know if it was an owl or a hawk. We don't know if he trapped it or if he manually caught it or if he just found it in the woods with a broken appendage of some sort. Somehow he managed to capture this animal and take it home to try to nurse it back to health. And the story goes that he saw a black line show up in the owl's or the bird's eye, and that over time, as he nursed this bird back to health, that this black line disappeared. So what's really important here, and I'm going to tell you why this is the important part, is that whatever he thought he saw spurred him on to do research as an adult and to begin laying the foundation for iridology. Now, I use the words whatever he thought he saw because that has never been replicated anywhere else. One would think that with all of the rescue facilities for wild game and wild birds that take in animals that have been injured with broken limbs and they're nursed back to health and then they're rehabilitated to go back into the wild, one would think that a modern veterinarian or veterinarian technician or even a volunteer would have seen this marking in some of the bird's eyes and the owl's eyes that they work with. The fact of the matter is it's never been replicated. And so we have to take this story and just be grateful for the fact that whatever he thought he saw was enough to get him to do research. Hi, Dina, and hi, Banakalik. I hope I said that right on Instagram. It's good to have you with us. So Ignaz did begin doing research as he approached adulthood and into his adult years, and he started sorting out an iris map, which is pretty exciting stuff, actually. And then we have also Pastor Nils Liljeqvist, who was in Stockholm, Sweden. Now look at our year overlap here. So Ignaz was born in 1826 and Nils was born in 1851. Now, what Nils did is he correctly correlated the density of the fiber structure. So can you see that down here, these threads in this eye are very, very tightly packed. The threads in this eye are much more loosely woven. And he correlated the density of the fiber to resilience and overall resistance to disease and constitutional strength. And so what that means is that he correctly sorted out that this person has a stronger resistance to disease and an easier time of bouncing back from health concerns than this person. This person has to work harder to maintain their health, and they always are going to have to be vigilant. There may always be bits of health struggles for them. We also now understand that melanin is what is responsible for pigments in the eye. So you can see this brown pigment here. You might be able to see that there's a bit of yellowish in this eye as well. This eye has a tiny, tiny hint of yellow over here. But we also know that these pigments, again, are from melanin. They are not from toxic exposure. So these people didn't get exposed to heavy metals or chemicals or medications. This is also an inherent programming. So when we see again this person on the left with this tight, finely packed, densely packed fiber structure, has stronger resiliency, better reactivity, they bounce back better. This person takes a little more effort to be well. That doesn't mean they aren't going to be well. It just means they need to learn the rules that apply to them, and they need to stick to those rules in order to be able to feel well. Pastor Emanuel Falca, again, spanning about the same time frame as Neil Lilliquist and even Ignaz van Petzschle. He was in Germany. He created a map of the iris. Now, this is before the internet, folks. These people were not collaborating, and yet their iris maps were coming up very similar to one another, which is really exciting. It's kind of like the research on the double helix DNA, where the research was being done in labs, very hush-hush, 2 different labs in 2 different places in the world, and within weeks of each other, they discovered the double helix for DNA. Kind of that collective consciousness, I guess. Rudolf Schnabel, also in Germany, researched pigment. So he was very interested in what causes these different colors in the eye. And he also studied pupil tonus. Can you all see that this pupil is actually not round? If you can see that, give me a yes wherever you are. Because what he began to sort out was that the pupil tone, or the shape, and also the size, give us information about various things, including the nervous system and spinal alignment. Rudolf Schnabel was one of the first to use a microscope to examine the iris. So that's pretty exciting. He was on the cutting edge. Rudolf Schnabel also believed that iridology was a science and an art. And he said this: it was no easy task. And those who believe or would like to believe that handling iridoscopy or iridology can be learned within a few weeks or even days are mistaken and do a disservice to a good cause. It's one of the reasons that why when I teach iridology, I don't do it as a weekend intensive, because I want my students to have time to practice what they learn before we add more concepts. We have Joseph Ungerer from Germany again. He was a student of Schnabel's, so now we've got people knowing each other. He knew that students were reading books and accepted the printing and accepting the printed word about iridology before adequate research was completed. So even though he was also doing research, he was very firm that he refused to publish his work until it had been analyzed and reviewed by his professional peers. He wanted them to scrutinize it to make sure it was holding up. And that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. We have Joseph Deck, who also in Germany, a lot of this research came out of that Central European area. He was a dedicated iridology researcher. He pioneered iridology photography, which has made our lives so much easier in some ways and so much harder in other ways. And he was also an instructor, very handsome man. Yeah, very handsome. We have Theodore Kriega, who was a student of Ungerer, Deck, and Schnabel. So he was taking those 3 teachers and working with everything they had. He felt that iridology was a #1 assessment tool and was best used with other assessment tools like urine analysis, hands, fingernails, tongue, and feces. He said, "I hope that a later generation will succeed in establishing a single uniform system. This is where some of our challenges lie right now. In spite of zealous efforts, these have so far not succeeded." More modernly, we have Bernard Jensen, who was in the United States, and he is known as the father of North American iridology. He brought iridology to North America and kept it alive. And then we have Harry Wolff, who was in a roundabout sort of way my first constitutional teacher, and Bill Caradonna, who was my first face-to-face iridology teacher. Now, when I say Bernard Jensen kept things alive, his is what we recognize as the North American style of iridology. And it's what I learned 40 years ago. We have grown so much from that, thanks to Harry Wolff and Bill Caradonna. Harry is an American-born German-speaking fellow, and he was able to get a hold of the books by Joseph Deck and the other German teachers and started studying them. And so he was responsible for bringing constitutional to North America. Thanks to the good work of Bernard Jensen in keeping iridology alive, Harry has been able to get the good word out that things have continued, that research has developed this science, and that we are ready to move forward. So why does iridology work? It's not just a fluke. It's not just a fluke at all. Your iris is an inherent trait, just like your fingerprint is. But unlike your fingerprint, which you can change by, cutting your finger, that's going to change your fingerprint. You don't get to change your iris unless you do actual damage to it. The eyeball is the largest neural receptor in the body. It is connected via direct nerve length, so not a chain of nerves, but single nerves go from the eye to the optic centers in the brain. We know that the iris has 28,000 nerve endings. We're not sure what they all do just yet. More research needs to be done. We know that the eyeball develops embryologically at the same time as the nervous system, which makes sense with the eyeball being a neural receptor. And if there are challenges in the body that the brain knows about, if there are genetic glitches is a strong word, but genetic things that are not genetic, if there are genetic warps or glitches, I'll use that word, even though it's not great. And the brain, of course, knows about those, and they manifest in the iris. They show up in the iris. Now, when we see these markings in the iris, it's not a guarantee of a problem. It only shows an inherent potential. So how are you doing so far? Any questions for me so far? Are we making sense here? If we're making sense, give me a 1. So we're going to actually launch into doing 3 iris analyses very quickly here in just a moment. And as we do these, I want to plant a seed. Oh, yes, I love it. We're getting a lot of 1s. That is brilliant. Thank you so much. I love to make sure we're getting feedback and that it's working. This is the seed that I want to put out there, is that the upcoming course, Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology Assessment System, has opened registration, and the course starts on January 28th. So this course is taught online via live webinars just like this one, and it prepares students to take the certification exam with the International Iridology Practitioners Association if that is the direction they want to take. And thank you, Facebook attendees, Magdi and Brandy, for weighing in and letting me know that, yes, this is making good sense for you. So if you would like to attend an information webinar about the upcoming course, so this is just to get information. This is not a commitment. You're not putting your credit card online here. Hop on over to iridology.education/webinar and register for the course, for the info webinar. It is happening tomorrow at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. So that's, I don't know what time zones you are all in. That is 6 hours later than what we started today. I've designed this course specifically for nutrition coaches, herbalists, and naturopaths, because you've got anatomy and physiology under your belt, and that means we can go way deeper than just learning iris markings. We can work with how the markings affect one another, the interpretation of each other, And we can work with practicing creating protocols when we are in the course, and what questions to ask, and actually how to use iridology in your wellness coaching business. In the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course, I teach constitutional iridology, and I teach how to use it, how to integrate it with nutrition or herbology, whatever your modality is. And we do that and teach you how to create sequential programs for your clients. So taking them from point A to point B to point C and building their health. We never ever use the eyes to diagnose disease, regardless of what you've seen on social media. Constitutional iridology will help you stay within your scope of practice, but will also teach you how to assess your clients quickly and accurately. This course is designed to give you, again, all of the curriculum you need to prepare to certify with the International Iridology Practitioners Association. The equipment that you use to view the iris as a professional is also very important, and we talk about that a whole bunch more in the course. And I actually offer extra specific coachings for my students and my graduates to help them refine their skills with using the proper equipment. In the meantime, everyone starts with a cell phone, just saying. So you ready to do some analysis with me? Yeah. If you are, give me a thumbs up or a wave. Let me know you're ready to do some analysis here. Okay, so what can iridology teach us? When we look at constitutional iridology, excellent, thank you, brilliant. When we look at constitutional iridology, we need to recognize that there are 3 foundational constitutions, and we are going to do an analysis for on each of those constitutions. So this is the first one that we are looking at. When we are looking at constitutional iridology, it teaches us, again, about inherent predispositions. So the client comes to see us with a specific question or a specific health concern. We need to take their health concern, look at their eyes, and from there, ask them questions. Okay, the beauty of iridology is it helps us to laser focus the questions we ask our clients. Now, and this is what I so loved. As a North American iridologist, I was taught you tell the client what's wrong with them. Only, you put up this great big long laundry list and you might be right on 3 or 4 of the points, but the rest of them, they don't have, because these are genetic potentials. With constitutional iridology, as Bill Caradonna so aptly taught me, the eyes teach us what questions to ask. And so let's have a look at this client. Now, this client's complaint was that she had a lot of stress and she wanted to lose some weight. So as I look at her eyes, this is what we call a biliary constitution. It's not a blue eye, but it's also not a true brown eye. Look at the fact that we can actually see some fiber in here. That's the giveaway that it's not a true brown eye. And so this client had brought in some lab test results, and her A1C was elevated, as was her cholesterol. Now, hopefully you're familiar with what those tests mean. I always recommend that my students and that iridology practitioners should have a lab manual on their desk that describes the tests and what they mean and what they indicate, so that we understand how to work with things. So when we look at a biliary eye, we know that the first areas of concern for people with biliary, the big catch-all concerns, are liver, how well their liver works, digestion. There's almost always some digestive compromise or potential for, and there's almost always a potential for blood sugar issues. Well, again, A1C is all about your blood sugars, and your elevated cholesterol is about blood sugars and liver, and to a certain extent digestion. So this client is fitting the bill quite nicely. This eye also tells us, as we see these rings that are coming around here, that this client is predisposed to spending a lot of time in the sympathetic nervous system response zone. So when we think of the sympathetic nervous system response, what are we thinking? Fight, flight, or freeze, right? And we're also thinking that she's always on the edge waiting for the next crisis. She's always just ready to go and panic and get into it and potentially overblow the situation and really bring the stress into her own body. We also see, because of her being biliary and some of the colors that we see in her eye, that she's also prone to having her liver run the show, which, emotionally, liver is where we store anger, bitterness, resentment. When we see that she's prone to liver, we also want to ask questions, if they're applicable, about her immune system, because liver has a strong impact there, about blood symptoms, which we already know from her elevated cholesterol. We want to ask about energy, because liver, digestion, blood sugars all plays into energy. Allergies, because digestion and liver all play into allergies. Hormonal issues, digestive issues, they all tie into liver in some way, shape, or form. Now, as I'm looking at her eyes, I'm also thinking, now she's in her mid-60s, and I'm thinking MTHFR defect, because she's got this particular kind of pigment here, which has a strong correlation to the MTHFR defect. Are you familiar with MTHFR? If you are, just put MTHFR in the chat. I'm not going to go into what it is, but I just want to see how many of you are familiar with MTHFR. Some of you are, some of you are not. Okay, fair enough. So in a nutshell, MTHFR means that her liver doesn't methylate her B vitamins, particularly folate and B12 properly, which of course, if you're not folating your B12, can lead to anemia. But also, if you're not methylating your folate and your B12 and the unmethylated versions build up in your system, it can lead to mental health issues and emotional situations. So this is a liver enzyme situation. And so we see that she's got, the liver is impacting digestion, could be MTHFR. She lives in this sympathetic response zone, and stress never makes anything better. It usually makes everything worse. We see some oranging here, which suggests that there might be a bit of pancreas involvement as well. In the whites of her eye and the sclera, we've got blood vessels that are running parallel to the limbus of the iris. So the limbus is the edge of the iris. So we've got blood vessels running parallel here, which suggests that there is congestion happening, specifically because of the placement of this in her heart and lungs. So we're wondering, is there some kind of arterial blockage happening, particularly in that heart? So is this all making sense so far? I mean, this is how quickly we do an assessment and iris analysis when you know your stuff. This doesn't take you hours. You're not going to add 2 hours to your first consultation. So we suggested increasing her leafy greens to help her pick up her methylated Bs. We added some protein to her diet because as we did the diet assessment, she was a little low on protein. And of course, we need the protein to make the blood cells, and we need the protein to just keep her blood sugar stable. We increased her low carb vegetables as well. She was eating too much high carb, and we needed to increase the low carb, and we cut out the refined foods. So we really cleaned up her diet. Supplement wise, and we started working together with her. She's actually been a client of mine for 38 years. She just resurfaced, clients fade out and then they come back. So she resurfaced about 1.5 years ago, which is when we started doing this. And then we worked together for about 4 or 5 sessions, and then she faded away again. And then I just heard from her a couple of months ago. So this is what we did in her initial appointment. We added some omega-3, some berberine, and some garden essence enzymes. And we did that really well. And she was so good with the dietary changes. And after 3 months, she went back and got more lab tests, and all of her numbers were within the normal range. We had cleaned her up beautifully. She had lost 20 pounds. She was feeling really good. And then the stress hit. And when the stress hit, she totally abandoned everything. Stress does that, right? We forget the good things. We forget to take good self-care. So just before Christmas this year, she had a massive heart attack. She survived, which is good, thanks to her husband, who recognized there was a problem. They live about 3 minutes from a hospital, and he took her there and they got her in right away, and she got treatment immediately. So since then, we've been talking, we got her back on her program. Now, do you see how we anticipated that there could be arterial blockages happening just from seeing this and knowing that her cholesterol was elevated? What is that telling us? And so when we saw this, you know, we knew we needed to be working preventively, and that's exactly what we did. But it was too little too late, right? Now and since then I've spoken with her about stress, and stress, she had a particular stress that is a type of stress that can also trigger heart attacks. And so we've talked about that and what she needs to do to undo that stress effect in her body. So now we are working on getting her numbers fixed, on strengthening her heart, and on helping her to be as healthy as possible again. So again, constitutional iridology does not enable us to diagnose. I could not say, you are blocking arteries, you will have a heart attack. But I could ask those questions, and especially when they were juxtaposed against her lab tests, that's why we started doing what we were doing. And if she had been able to maintain that program from 1.5 years ago all the way through, maybe it would have prevented a heart attack. I don't know. We'll never know. So we cannot diagnose. This doesn't give us disease names, but it's used as a guide to help us understand where the issues lie and what the questions are we need to ask, and it informs our suggestions. Now, as I've done this, have you noticed that I did not ever say she's toxic? I did not say she needs to cleanse. Her eyes suggest that she could have liver challenges, but did I ever say her liver is congested? Did I ever say her eyes look unhealthy? We can't possibly know that she's toxic, she needs a cleanse, that her liver is congested from looking at her eyes. And to say the eyes look unhealthy, the eyes are what she's inherited. She can't change that. And they don't look unhealthy. They are beautiful works of art. We need to take all the information we have that the client brings in, any lab tests that they are able to share with us, and the eyes, and combine it all to have a conversation so we can dig deeper and understand our client on a deep level so that we can use whatever training we've got to craft programs. Now, this client also has nutrition training and is also a herbalist, so she knows her stuff, but we all sometimes need someone to push us along, don't we? And to keep us on track. So from everything that we know about this client, her last appointment with her cardiologist, the cardiologist said by June, you'll never know this happened. Your heart will be fine. It's going to totally recover. And this is all great. So we are working with that information as well to support what the cardiologist and what the cardio programs are telling her to do. All right, so what else can iridology teach us? This is a lymphatic iris, lymphatic, which means it is basically a blue eye. A lymphatic eye will always have at least a little bit of blue in it. And again, notice the fiber structure, that she's got really nice tight fiber weave here, really nice. So that means she's resilient, that her body will respond very nicely to things. She also is what we call polyglandular, which means that she has lots of petal shapes in her eyes. Some of them are very small, but she's got lots of them. And this suggests that she has a predisposition towards hormonal imbalances. All right, now a predisposition too. And we need to understand, if she has that predisposition, what are the things that would mitigate it? What are the things that would make it worse? Okay, and that's a really important thing to know here. And she is also what we call anxiety tetanic. Can you see that there are some wrinkles in her eye that come around kind of like rings on a dartboard? Can you see those? If you can, give me a yes. Let me know that you can see those. Because these again tell us that she lives in that sympathetic nervous system response field. Yes, thank you. Thank you for Teresa and Tanya for letting me know you can see this. Excellent. And Susan and Luz, thank you so much. So she also has a tight collarette. This tells us that she's predisposed to constipation and to reduced energy production in her body. Only predisposed. What she does with her lifestyle is going to determine how that manifests. So we must always ask a client things. We must never tell them. I would never say to this client that you are prone, you have constipation, don't you? I would never say, you're tired a lot, aren't you? Because I don't know that. I don't know that. So what I do instead, and the way we use constitutional, is we look at this and we say, do you have any symptoms that would suggest your hormones might want to be out of balance? And depending on whether it's a man or a woman, you can describe some common symptoms. Do you find that, or tell me about bowel movements. How often do you have a bowel movement and what is the consistency? Right, so I'm never going to put words in their mouth. I want to ask the questions in such a way that they give me the information and I haven't tainted their answers at all. Okay, so as I ask those questions here, her bowels are great because she has a primarily organic, very high vegetable content diet. She figured out a long time ago that she can handle some raw, but she really likes most of her vegetables lightly cooked. And that means that she's having a couple of really good bowel movements a day, and her bowel transit time is excellent. So she is doing what she needs to do to regulate her genetic function of her intestinal tract. And that is amazing. And what I do when clients give me that information is then I will say, I'm really glad you're doing that because this suggests a predisposition towards constipation. You're doing all the right things to prevent that. Keep it up, right? Do you see the power in that, in reinforcing for your client the good things they're already doing? When I asked about hormones, she said, well, my hormones are a little bit weird in that we've been trying to get pregnant for a couple of years, she and her husband, and we're just not. And when I do my basal body temperature, my temps are always a little bit low. Oh, interesting. So what does that suggest to us? It suggests that perhaps her thyroid might be a little low. So we sent her to her medical doctor to get her TSH, her T3, her reverse T3, those kinds of things done so that we could figure out, is this potentially a thyroid issue? There, other than the fact that she is polyglandular, there is very little to suggest that her thyroid should be the issue, but her lab test came back a little bit low, suggesting that thyroid is it. So when we've got this, again, as we've got this happening, we know that the other thing that polyglandular can suggest is a predisposition towards unbalanced blood sugars, towards keeping, real struggles keeping blood sugars in balance, but her diet was great. Her diet is great. She has, being a lymphatic eye type, she also has an extra lymphatic marker coming around the edges here that suggests she's prone to lymphatic stagnation. Now, I'm not going to say your lymphatics are stagnant. I'm going to ask her, what do you do for physical activity? Right? Because we know that physical activity is what stimulates lymphatic movement, right? And so she tells me that she does something every day. Sometimes it's yoga, sometimes it's going for walks, sometimes she'll do a little bit of a HIIT workout. Great. I can then just say, this suggests that your lymphatic system might want to be congested, and then teach her what her lymphatic system does and how it works, and reinforce that what she is doing is fabulous. Keep it up. Right? Do you see the power in this? So then I needed to also look at the fact that she's got clouding here. This clouding, again, is inherent. It's what she's picked up from generations. And it suggests that she might be predisposed to some leaky gut kind of situations where things are leaving the intestinal tract and getting into the blood and the lymph that don't belong there. And so this again is that diet question. What is your diet like? And her diet is really good. She's gluten-free, she's dairy-free, she's eating really clean sourced proteins, things like that. So the next question is, are you burpy or farty? A little bit farty. All right, that's a good piece of information. She's trying to get pregnant. Her lab tests on her thyroid come back a little bit low. And we know that in order to boost her thyroid, what we're going to need to do is make sure she's getting enough protein, enough iodine, and enough manganese, right? And then we're going to help her digest the protein because she has some indicators in here that suggest she doesn't digest protein very well. Is this making sense? Right? Do you see how we can put this all together, how the eye is a piece of the assessment puzzle, right? When we see that we've got these little bits of orangey colored pigments, they suggest, again, pancreas. She's already doing what she needs to be doing there. I don't need to worry about that. She does have in both eyes a bit of a wonky fiber running through the ovary. So through each of her ovaries, and that suggests that the ovaries themselves might have a bit of a challenge. What can we do to support that? Well, there's many herbs we can do that support ovulation. So we can cycle through and experiment with that. She has had scarring in her fallopian tubes and she's had them recanalized. And so, but none of that's going to show up here because that wasn't the result of genetics. That was the result of infection. So we always blend what we see with what the client wants, with lab tests, with questions to answer. So this becomes a piece of the assessment puzzle. Is this working for you? So in her first appointment, we put her on my favorite prenatal vitamin, which is from Designs for Health. It's called Prenatal Pro. And I love it because the bees are methylated. I love it because it has a good complement of bees. And because she's anxiety tetanic, those bees come in really handy. We also added a little of the L5-MTHF form of the folate because, again, she's got this little bit of a brown pigment here that could suggest that she has the MTHFR challenge. And we gave her some herbs for her nervous system to help her just kind of not be so anxious about things. And we also gave her N-acetylcysteine because there's been a lot of research that backs up the idea that N-acetylcysteine supports phase 1 and phase 2 liver detox, and that N-acetylcysteine can enhance fertility. And indeed, after doing this for about 6 months, she did conceive. Yay, go us. I also then suggested in a follow-up appointment that we needed to increase her healthy fats. And we needed to continue building her protein. She had started to build them, but hadn't brought them up quite as high as I wanted them. And I specifically wanted them from wild game and from grass-fed animals. So if she was doing wild fish, that was great. If she was doing grass-fed bison, that was great because we wanted that high omega content specifically for her. Is that all fitting? Did that all make sense for you? All right. A brown eye. Let's look at a true brown eye. So this is what we call a hematogenic eye. This is a woman in her mid-50s, and she came to me with hot flashes. Now, the beauty of doing this and doing it well is your clients will come back. Maybe not next month, but they will come back. She came to me, and I had to admit I did not remember her. She said she'd been to me 20 years ago for a couple of appointments, that she'd had a sinus problem, which we had totally addressed, and it was no longer an issue. She was grateful for that, so she knew when she had hot flashes that I was the go-to girl. And that was amazing. When you do this right, they come back. So as we looked at this, now we already know from our biliary eye type that the brown base to the eye is liver, right? We know that if the liver's not doing its stuff quite right, if it's not handling phase 1, phase 2 detox, we have a greater chance of hot flashes. We may not get the cholesterol being made to give the adrenal glands the hormones they need to balance out the hormones after menopause. So there's a lot of things that we need to be aware of here. So first question after I found out what she wanted help with was, what's your diet like? Now, her diet was amazing, really, really excellent. There was only one thing that was out of alignment, and I'm going to tell you what that was in a minute. She wanted to get rid of these hot flashes, right? They were messing up her life. And so her eyes took me in two directions. First off, I needed to ask about that nervous system. How does she respond to stress? What are her adrenals like? Does she handle things really well? Now, she is a psychologist, so she understands a lot of different stress coping mechanisms. She has implemented them, and that's great. So I had to ask her, do you find that stress makes your hot flashes worse? And she said, yes, I find it does. All right. So then I needed to ask, are you aware of any things with your liver? Do you have problems digesting fats? Do you hold on to anger? And she said, no, I'm good. I have lots of healthy fats and oils in my diet. And if I feel myself being angry, I go back to all the things I know to help me release it so I don't hold it in my body. And I'm going, that is very good, because that is all foundational. The one thing that was out of alignment in her diet was that she would have a little cup of Turkish coffee every day. Now, I don't drink coffee. I have no idea what Turkish coffee is. I just know that it involves coffee. And so I asked her, would you be willing to do an experiment? And she said, sure. And I said, can you give up the coffee for 10 days? And she did. She gave up the coffee for 10 days. And when she came back, I asked her, how are the hot flashes? And she said, oh, they're gone. And I said, that's great. I said, how do you want to proceed? And she said, well, I like my Turkish coffee. I am going to keep drinking it. Do you have a herb that will help me? And I said, I don't have a herb that is strong enough to override the powers of coffee, because the caffeine and the acids in the coffee mess up, respectively, the adrenals and the liver. And I just don't have anything strong enough to counteract those effects. And so the choice you need to make is, do you want to have the coffee and the hot flashes, or do you want to find a coffee substitute and be hot flash free? And she chose the coffee. And, you know, it made me sad, but it's not my decision. My choice here now is to love her and to let her know that I will support her in any way I can, but I will not recommend supplements because they won't work here and they would be wasting her money. And so if there's anything else I can do, just give me a call, because I'm happy to help you if I possibly can. Does all of this make sense? If this does, give me a 1 in the comments. Is this all making sense? Yeah. Thank you, Leslie. I appreciate that. Yeah. And Dolores, thank you. Oh, yeah. Lots of ones. Yes. Love this. Fabulous. Are you seeing how quick and easy an actual iris assessment is once you understand it, and how it can actually help you draw on everything you're doing? And actually, if you're with me on Facebook, Stephanie Morgan is one of my grads, and she says, if you enjoy this, you'll love her class. Thank you, Stephanie. Woohoo! Big shout out to you. Thank you for being there today. Fabulous. Yeah. And so with this, again, we use iridology to gain insight. We use it to guide our questions, to help us create rapport. We use it to help inform our recommendations. I mean, how powerful is it when your client gives you their shopping list of symptoms, you look at their eyes and you haven't given them a questionnaire? I do not use an intake questionnaire. And that client then, based on their symptoms and what you see in their eyes, you are now asking questions that are specific to them, not questions that are general to everybody, but specific to them. What does that do for building rapport? What does that do for building core trust here? So important, right? When we do iridology this way, it helps us to create a doable sequence of recommendations to enhance our client success. Now, I'm sure you've all seen this on the internet where people post eye photos and someone hops on and they give this long list of markers, this long list of symptoms, and this long list of homework. How effective is that? I read those lists. I've been in the industry 40 years. I get overwhelmed. It's like, where would you start? Pick one and go from there, but they're not all equally important. When we do iridology properly, it helps us to understand, what is the starting point? What are the 2 or 3 key things, maybe 1 or 2 dietary changes, 1 or 2 supplements, depending on your client's background, that if they implement them now, they will see some result within the next 2 to 4 weeks. And then they come back and you give them a next step and you build the program sequentially, helping them to have success every step along the way so that they can be massively successful. Does that make sense? That it would be a great way to work, a great way to ensure that your clients reach their health goals, rather than, I'm going to be really crude here, rather than vomiting everything you know all over them in one appointment, and then they run screaming because they couldn't possibly do it all. So again, Iridology helps us to gain insight. It helps to guide our questions. It helps us to create rapport. It informs our recommendations. And it helps us to create doable sequences of recommendations to enhance our client success. So if you'd like to speak with me directly about the course, please send me an email. There is my email address on the screen, judith@cobblestonehealth.com. If you already, or if you want to join me tomorrow evening at 5 p.m. Mountain Time for the info course, there is the registration link, iridology.education/webinar. And again, this is a no commitment thing. This is where you learn about what's included in the course, how it will benefit you, how it is taught, how much mentoring and support there is, totally designed to give you the information you need to help you decide if this course is going to be right for you and if this is the right time for you to take this course. Are there any other questions? Maggie says, how about the black rim around the iris isn't a bit suggesting skin issues or arthritis? Maggie, because none of the cases we looked at today needed us to look at that edge called a scurf rim, we didn't need to bring it up, right? Again, I only talk about with my client, and in the assessment with my client, I only talk about the markers that are specifically correlating to the symptoms they brought in. Once we have actually taken them to the health point they want to be at, and they think that I just want to be rid of my hot flashes, and we get rid of that, once that's gone, there will often be other things that come up. Now that the hot flashes are not front and center, now they want help with other things, right? And then we can look at other markings or look at how the markings we've already looked at are impacting the current symptom. And so I'm very careful to always stay focused on what my client wants. When we get to a certain point, I might go deeper and we might be able to go into other markings as they are appropriate. Michelle is asking, will there be a recording of tomorrow's webinar? I will not be able to make that time. Michelle, only people who have registered for the course will get the recording, or for the course, for the webinar, will get the recording. So please register for it. And I'll just know that you won't be there face-to-face with me, and we'll make sure that you get the recording link. All right. Anything else? Anybody else have a question? Michelle says, thank you. Wonderful. A recording for today as well. The recording from today will go out on Monday. It'll go out in my regular weekly emails. So watch for that in your Monday emails. Any other questions? All right, we're good. Thank you so much for being with me. I hope that you found that useful. Did you learn something today about how to use iridology, how it's applied in a clinical setting? In my course, now some of you may also be under lockdown, right? And you might not be able to work face-to-face, but in the course itself, I teach you how to teach your clients to get their iPhotos with their smartphones so they can email them to you. They won't always be perfect iPhotos, but they're a good starting point. And Susan says, thank you for all the great information. You're welcome. Many thank yous coming in. Thank you so much for being with me. And I look forward to seeing you hopefully tomorrow night on the webinar. Take good care and have a great day. Bye for now.